Hi, and welcome to the Rachel Abbey Show. Today we're going to be talking about wedding budget. I know it's scary. It's money, and nobody likes talking about money. But I'm going to be talking about how to customize your wedding to make it so that your budget and wedding reflect you. One of the first things that you need to do, it's a scary word, it's research. Literally just Google what the average price of wedding is in your area. This will give you a baseline to know what's reasonable and unreasonable, feasible and unfeasible for a wedding for you. Just knowing that baseline isn't telling you what you have to spend, isn't telling you you can only spend. It's just giving you a good guideline that if you're wanting to spend $2,000, you're not gonna be able to do that without eloping at a courthouse, right? Gives you a good baseline. Like, for example, when this is recorded, the average wedding in my area is just underneath $40,000. That's the average. So that doesn't mean that it's every wedding. It just means on average, that is about where you get it. So if you're looking to spend $10,000 on your wedding, you need to keep in mind that price point gets you some things, but maybe not all things, which gets us to our next thing. After you've figured out what the average is for your area, you need to sit down and figure out what is feasible for you, right? You need to sit down with your partner and literally figure out what a number is. What are your bounds? This is where we want to be. This is the max. And have it literally tangibly out, right? This baseline will give you a good idea of where to go from there. What your wedding could look like. So if you're wanting to have a $10,000 wedding, you can know that you're not going to have the grand ballroom, right? You're going to know that you're not going to have the gigantic guest list. You can have a beautiful wedding, but you're going to need to know what your bounds are to be reasonable with. Which gets me to a thing that sometimes people can find as controversial, but it is literally, I found over and over and over to be one of the most helpful things to spend the least amount of money, which is hire a wedding planner. I know you have to pay for a wedding planner, but listen, a good wedding planner is worth every cent and more that you will ever pay. They know how to help you stick to your budget. I once had a bride whose plan was to do a DIY wedding. This is a true story. And her hope was to spend $10,000. She got a good price on a venue. She got a good deal on a good price for her catering. But by the time the wedding came around, her DIY wedding ended up costing her the average $40,000. How? How did it go from 10 to 40? Because she started spending money on decor things, on favors, on these different things that she didn't calculate out, didn't pay attention to. And eventually, over the course of 2 years of planning her wedding, $5 here, $30 there, $70 there, added up and added up fast. A wedding planner doesn't allow that to happen. They sit there and they help you know what is reasonable, where and what you can get for that price, what that looks like, and how to get the most for your money, how to connect you to great vendors that they know will show up and do a good job. They will help create and cultivate a wedding that reflects you, but also reflects your budget. And they're fantastic at doing that. One of another ways that is really great for keeping your budget small or tight if you're wanting to is a minimalist design. The statement less is more is really, really true. And one of the best ways to lessen your costs is also pick a pretty venue. Whether that's you're eloping on the side of a mountain and that's your pretty, or if you're picking a venue that's a actual building that will house a ceremony and a reception that's for guests. If your venue is pretty, it doesn't need to be dressed up as much. Just being honest. If you get a venue that's, you can, paint a mustache on a pig, but it's still a pig kind of idea. So be very careful about your venue and that it, bare minimum, nothing on it, reflects something that you want, that the look is something that you appreciate and think is pretty, because decor will only get it from where it is to a little bit better, a little bit more you. So if its baseline is not something that you appreciate, it's not going to be. But that may not be a priority for you. But if it is, minimalist design is a great way to go about it. Another way, and it is one of the best things to do, is at the start of your wedding process, sit down with your spouse or spouse-to-be and prioritize what is important to you. There's lots of different rules on budgets and how it's supposed to function and work, but the reality is there isn't a rule or standard. Maybe to you, the venue doesn't matter, but having as many guests as possible does. Maybe to you, flowers don't matter, but photography does. Maybe to you, you care about everybody having a fantastic meal, but you don't really care to have a dessert. It's important that your values and your spouse's values or spouse-to-be's values are represented in your budget. So that means sitting down and talking about what you really want, what they really want, and how to go about ranking what gets money first. Because what is the top priority is going to have the bigger chunks in it, right? A huge thing to cut back on costs is shortening your guest list. Literally, one of the best tips I give to every one of my couples is if you think of a person on your list, like come up with a name, Susie Susan, right? Would you buy Susie Susan a $150 birthday present, Christmas present? No? Then that's what you're doing by inviting them to your wedding. The number of people on your list, each one of those is going to represent, generally speaking, about $150, if not more. So your guest list is a gigantic, the largest way to cut back on costs. For every person that you can cut back on, your budget can literally shrink by half almost. It is crazy. Also, think about in 5 years' time and 10 years' time. Will it matter if they came? Will it not? But again, this goes to your priority, but shortening your guest list is a gigantic way to cut back on costs. Another wonderful one is traditions. Eliminating traditions. I know. You got to pick what matters to you, but traditions can count up for a lot of things. For example, favors, it's a tradition. Do you want to know one of the largest things that's left over at weddings? It's favors. If it's not food, if it's something, or lottery tickets, it is generally speaking left. The number of times at the end of a wedding when coasters or that glass you got monogrammed is left behind by the couple, and the couple, I mean left behind by everybody who attended. So the couple ends up having so many of that product. Now, if you like those favors, then all the better for you. But if you're trying to cut back on costs, favors is a great way to do it. Another is guest book, unity candle, veil. Maybe you don't care about a veil. That's another thing. And honestly, flowers. I love flowers. But one of the ways that you can cut back on costs is if you want to have beautiful flowers, but not necessarily the high price, don't have your bridesmaids carry flowers down. Have them carry their favorite book. Have them just hold a groomsman's hand when they walk down. Have them hold ribbons. I don't know. But bridesmaids' flowers add up. And honestly, if you're not a baseline, like just to give perspective, in this area right now, a good, like a decent bridesmaid bouquet is going to be close to $100. So if you're having 6 bridesmaids, guess what you could cut back on and then not have that. But also, you could still have a gigantic, wonderful bouquet for yourself. Or you could decide, you know what, I don't want flowers. I want to do this. Or I want to, instead of having a bouquet, I want to have it at the ceremony, or any number of things. But these traditions, slowly but surely, can add up. So if it's not of value to you, you don't need to have it. Just because it's on the list, just because somebody else did it, doesn't mean it has to have a priority for you, which again goes back to the priority list. So this wedding is to represent you and your spouse-to-be. Your love story, the two of you individually and the two of you together. So make sure that when you're considering your budget, that's reflected. Anyway, I hope these tips and tricks will help you create a budget that reflects you and your marriage to be. Thanks for listening in, and if you like this, follow for more.